Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum to you all. On behalf of DHA Education System, I welcome you all in my computer science class. Course code is 2210. In week 3 for class C2, format of this session will be carried out by taking the review of the topics covered in week 2, that is security and ethics. Then the topics to be covered in week 3 and their learning objectives will be discussed. I'll explain the content of this lesson through diagrammatical representations and web chart. Then the recap will be taken, and in the end assignment will be given that you can download from DHA portal to solve. In week 2, we discussed about security and integrity of data. Security means safety and secrecy of data, while integrity refers to the accurateness, completeness, and consistency of that data. We discussed various security risks and their prevention method. We discussed about hacking, viruses, phishing, pharming, war driving, spywares, and cookies. Let's take review of each of that security risk. Hacking. The act of gaining illegal access to a computer system is known as hacking. Hacking can be prevented by turning on firewalls, by using strong passwords and user IDs, and use of anti-hacking softwares. Viruses. Program or program codes that can replicate or copy itself with the intention of deleting or corrupting files or cause the computer to malfunction is known as viruses. Viruses can be prevented by installing antivirus softwares. You should not use softwares from unknown sources. They can be contagious to viruses. And you need to be very careful when opening emails attachments from unknown senders. Phishing. The creator sends out legitimate looking email as soon as the recipient clicks on a link in the email or attachment. The user is sent to a fake or bogus website. Phishing activities can be prevented by many of the ISP's filters, and the user should always be cautious when opening emails or attachment from any known or unknown sources. Pharming. Malicious code installed on a user's hard drive or on the web server. The code will redirect the user to a fake or bogus website without their knowledge. So, to prevent from your system from the pharming activity, you should always be alert and look out for the clues that they are being redirected to another website. And secondly, anti-spyware softwares can be installed to identify and remove the pharming code from the hard drive. War driving. The act of locating and using wireless internet connection illegally. It only requires a laptop or other portable device, a wireless network card, and an antenna to pick up wireless signals. War driving can be avoided with the use of wired equivalent privacy (WEP) encryption, or you can protect use of wireless device by having complex passwords before the internet can be accessed. And thirdly, you can use firewall to prevent outside user from gaining access. Spyware or key logging software. These softwares gathers information by monitoring key presses on the user's keyboard. The information is then sent back to the person who sent the software. So you can prevent your system by using anti-spyware spyware software, the user should always be alert and look out for the clues that their keyboard activity is being monitored. Using mouse to select character for password instead of keyboard can also prevent your system from spying activities. Cookies. Cookies are the small piece of data. When you visit any of the website, its reference is stored in the cookies. So when you are using a public network, you are supposed to delete the cookies of that system in regard to the security concerns for the website you have browsed. That was it for the topics covered in week 2. Now in week 3, we will cover the topics loss of data and data corruption, firewall and proxy server, security protocol, session caching, encryption, types of encryption, plain and ciphertext, authentication, denial of service attacks, and in last, application. By the end of this lesson, students, you will be able to enlist reason of data loss and corruption, identify data recovery methods, recognize the role of firewall and proxy server, choose best method to avoid malpractices, describe security protocol, distinguish between types of security protocol, analyze session caching, define encryption, describe types of encryption, explain plain and ciphertext, specify authentication method, recognize denial of service attack, and in last, you'll be able to enlist different applications to secure your data. Now let's start with the topic. Loss of data and data corruption. Considered a number of security issues which could lead to loss of data or the corruption of data, this session covers the potential impact on data caused by accidental maloperation, hardware malfunction, software malfunction on a computer system, and in each case, its safeguard and recovery methods to prevent the loss or corruption of data are considered. Now, in this diagram, there are the data loss and their recovery methods are given. Accidental loss of data, for example, the accidental deletion of a file. The recovery method is you can use backups in case data is lost or corrupted through an accidental operation. You need to save your data on regular basis. You need to use passwords and user IDs to restrict access to authorized users only. Then the next data corruption can be done through the hardware fault, such as head crash on the hard disk drive. The recovery method involves use of backups in case data is lost or corrupted through the hardware fault, use of UPS, uninterruptible power supply to prevent power loss causing hardware malfunction, save your data on regular basis, and use of parallel systems as backup hardware. Next data corruption method can be done through the software fault, that is, incompatible software installed on the system. Recovery method is you need to use of backups in case data is lost or corrupted through the software fault. Save data on regular basis in case the software suddenly freezes or crashes whilst the user is working on it. And last data corruption method, when incorrect computer operation is being performed. For example, incorrect shutdown procedure or incorrect procedure for removal of memory stick. So you can use a recovery method. You need to use of key backups in case data is lost or corrupted through wrong operation. So always keep the backup and correct training procedure so that users are aware of the correct operation of hardware. When you are supposed to turn off or shut down your computer, use the appropriate method to shut it down. Secondly, when you have to eject any of the device memory stick, then right-click on the drive and click on the option Eject. This is how you can safely remove that particular drive or device from your computer. That can minimize the method to corrupt the data. Firewalls and proxy servers. A firewall can be either software or hardware. It sits between the user's computer and an external network, for example, the internet, and filters information in and out of the computer. So in the diagram, you can see there is a user computer and there is internet, and in between there is a medium known as firewall. So whatsoever a user tries to upload or download, the firewalls filters it out and authenticate and validate the data. There are numerous tasks that can be carried out by the firewall. That includes examining the traffic between the user's computer or internal network and a public network, for example, internet. Checking whether incoming or outgoing data meets a given set of criteria. If the data fails the criteria, the firewall will block the traffic and give the user or network manager a warning that there may be a security issue. Logging all incoming and outgoing traffic to allow later interrogation by the user or network manager. Criteria can be set to prevent access to certain undesirable sites. The firewall can keep a list of all undesirable IP addresses, helping to prevent viruses or hackers entering the user's computer or internal network. And lastly, warning the user if some software on their system is trying to access an external data source, for example, automatic software upgrade. The user is given the option of allowing it to go ahead or request that such access is denied. However, there are certain circumstances where the firewall cannot prevent potential harmful traffic. Number one, it cannot prevent individuals on internal networks using their own modems to bypass the firewall. Number two, employees' misconduct or carelessness cannot be controlled by firewalls. For example, control of passwords or use of accounts. Number three, users on standalone computers can choose to disable the firewall, leaving their computer open to harmful traffic from the internet. All of these issues require management control or personal control on a single computer to ensure that the firewall is allowed to do its job effectively. Proxy servers. Proxy servers act as an intermediary between the user and a web server. A web server is a powerful machine that executes users' or clients' requests. In this diagram, you can see a user computer and a web server computer, and in between there is a proxy server. User sends request through the web browser. Proxy server sends the request to the web server. The request is executed and response is sent back to the proxy server. Proxy server filters it and sends the request back to the user's computer. And this is how a website is opened or a response is being done. There are numerous functions proxy server performs. That includes, number one, allowing the internet traffic to be filtered. They can block access to a website if necessary. This is a similar type or reaction as a firewall. Number two, by using the feature known as a cache, which can speed up access to information from a website. When the website is first visited, the home page is stored on the proxy server. When the user next visits the website, it now goes through the proxy server cache instead, giving much faster access. Number 3, keeping the user's IP address secret. This clearly improves security. And number 4, it acts like a firewall. Security protocols. We will now consider two forms of security protocol when using the internet. Number 1, Secure Socket Layer (SSL). Number 2, Transport Layer Security (TLS). Secure Socket Layer (SSL) is a type of protocol. Protocol is considered a set of rules that is used by computers to communicate with each other across a network. So SSL is a type of protocol. This allows data to be sent and received securely over the internet. When a user logs on to a website, SSL encrypts the data. Only the user's computer and a web server are able to make sense of what is being transmitted. A user will know if SSL is being applied when they see HTTPS or the small padlock sign in the status bar at the top of the screen. Now you can see that padlock sign and HTTPS in this diagram. So what happens when a user wants to access a secure website and receive and send data to it? The user's web browser sends a message so that it can connect with the required website, which is secured by SSL. The web browser then requests that the web server identifies itself. The web server responds by sending a copy of its SSL certificate to the user's web browser. If the web browser can authenticate this certificate, it sends a message back to the web server to allow communication to begin. Once this message is received, the web server acknowledges the web browser and the SSL encrypted two-way data transfer begins. Transport Layer Security (TLS). TLS is similar to SSL but is the more recent security system. TLS is a form of protocol that ensures the security and privacy of data between devices and users when communicating over the internet. It is essentially designed to provide encryption, authentication, and data integrity in a more effective way than its predecessor SSL. When a website and client or user communicate over the internet, TLS is designed to prevent a third party hacking into this communication, causing problems with data security. TLS is formed of two layers. Number 1, Record Protocol Layer. Number 2, Handshake Protocol Layer. Record Protocol. This part of the communication can be used with or without encryption. It contains the data being transferred over the internet. Handshake Protocol. This permits the website and the client or user to authenticate each other and to make use of encryption algorithms. A secure session between client and website is established. Only the most recent web browsers support both SSL and TLS, which is why the older SSL is still used in many cases. But what are the main differences between SSL and TLS since they both effectively do the same thing? It is possible to extend TLS by adding new authentication methods. TLS can make use of session caching, which improves the overall performance compared to SSL. TLS separates the handshaking process from the record protocol layer, which holds all the data. Session caching. When opening a TLS session, it requires a lot of computer time, due mainly to the complex encryption keys being used. The use of session caching can avoid the need to utilize so much computer time for each connection. TLS can either establish a new session or attempt to resume an existing session. Using the latter can considerably boost system performance. Encryption. Primarily, encryption is used to protect data in case it has been hacked, whilst encryption won't prevent hacking. It makes the data meaningless unless the recipient has the necessary decryption tools. There are two types of encryption. Number 1, symmetric encryption, and number 2, asymmetric encryption or public key encryption. Symmetric encryption. This is the simplest kind of encryption that involves only one secret key. That one secret key is used to cipher and decipher information. Symmetrical encryption is an old and best known technique. It uses a secret key that can either be a number, a word, or a string of random letters. It is blended with the plain text of a message to change the content in a particular way. The sender and the recipient should know the secret key that is used to encrypt and decrypt all the messages. Blowfish, AES, RC4, DES, RC5, and RC6 are examples of symmetric encryption algorithms. The main disadvantage of symmetric key encryption is that all parties involved have to exchange the key used to encrypt the data before they can decrypt it. Asymmetric encryption. Asymmetrical encryption is also known as public key cryptography, which is a relatively new method compared to symmetric encryption. Asymmetric encryption uses two keys to encrypt a plain text. Secret keys are exchanged over the internet or a large network. It ensures that malicious persons do not misuse the keys. It is important to note that anyone with a secret key can decrypt the message, and this is why asymmetrical encryption uses two related keys to boosting security: a public key and a private key. A public key is made freely available to anyone who might want to send you a message. The second private key is kept a secret so that you can only know. A message that is encrypted using a public key can only be decrypted using a private key, while also a message encrypted using a private key can be decrypted using a public key. Security of a public key is not required because it is publicly available and can be passed over the internet. Asymmetric key has a far better power in ensuring the security of information transmitted during communication. Asymmetric encryption is mostly used in day-to-day communication channels, especially over the internet. Popular asymmetric key encryption algorithm includes ICML, RSA, DSA, elliptic curve techniques, and PKCS algorithms. Plain text and ciphertext. Plain text, sometimes written as a single word, plain text, is described as the text or normal representation of data before it goes through an encryption algorithm, while ciphertext is the output from an encryption algorithm. In the diagram, you can see a message that is known as private data or plain text. Using any of the encryption algorithm or encrypted key, it is converted into the unreadable form, which is known as ciphertext. When this ciphertext is decrypted using the decryption key, it becomes again the plain text or the private message. Authentication. Authentication is used to verify the data comes from a trusted source. It works with encryption to strengthen internet security. For example, passwords and digital signatures. Passwords, usually a username and a password, are used to log on to many systems. Both username and password are checked against a secure file to confirm a person is who they claim to be. If either is incorrect or don't match up, then access is denied. In digital signatures, this system is based on public key encryption. It is a method used to ensure an electronic document is authentic. The following diagram sums up what happens when a user A sends a message to user B. User A writes a message. The message is put through a hashing algorithm. The hash number is encrypted using a private key. The message plus hash number are sent over the internet. The hash is decrypted by user B using the public key. The hash number is compared while the message to see if the message has been altered or not. So this is how authentication is being done. Biometric is another example of authentication. Biometrics relies on the unique characteristics of human being. Example includes fingerprint scan, retina scan, face recognition, voice recognition. Fingerprint scans. Images of fingerprints are compared against previously scanned fingerprints stored in a database. If they match, then access is allowed. Retina scan. Retina scans use infrared to scan the unique pattern of blood vessels in the retina. It is very secure since nobody has yet found a way to duplicate the blood vessel patterns. Denial of service attacks. A denial of service attack is an attempt at preventing users from accessing part of a network, notably an internet service. This is usually temporary but may be a very damaging act or a big breach of security. It does not just affect network, an individual can also be a target for such an attack. The attacker may be able to prevent a user from accessing their emails, accessing websites or web pages, accessing online services such as banking. One method of attack is to flood the network with useless traffic. How does this cause the problem? When a user types in or clicks on a URL of a website using their web browser, a request is sent to the internet server which contains the website or web page. Obviously, the server can only handle a finite number of requests. So, if it becomes overloaded by an attacker sending out thousands of requests, it won't be able to service the user's legitimate request. This is effectively a denial of service. This can happen to a user's email account, for example, by an attacker sending out many spam messages to their email account. Internet service providers, ISPs, only allow a specific data for each user. Consequently, if the attacker sends out very large or many hundreds of emails to the user's account, it will quickly get clogged up and the user won't be able to receive legitimate emails. An individual user or a website can guard against these attacks to some degree by using an up-to-date malware virus tracker, setting up a firewall to restrict traffic to and from the internet server or user's computer, by applying email filters to manage or filter out unwanted traffic or spam emails. Signs that a user can look out for to see if they are a victim of one of these attacks include slow network performance, opening files or accessing certain websites, unavailability or inability to access particular websites, and large amounts of spam mails reaching in the user's email account. Now let's discuss few applications. Online banking and online shopping are all at risk from many of the security issues described earlier in this lesson. We will now consider some of the ways banks protect their customers from online fraud. The following notes are in addition to safeguards such as encryption, SSL, virus scanners, and many of the other ways described earlier in this lesson. When a customer logs on to a banking website and carries out a transaction, encryption is used to protect the customer's personal details. However, banks carry out a number of other procedures to give additional protection. Not all of the methods described would be used by one bank. However, the notes gives some idea of the type of safeguards that might be encountered when a customer logs on to a bank's website. So number one, many banks use a 10 or 12-digit code, which is a unique code to the customer. So in the diagram, you can see it is asking, please enter your unique 12-digit code to authenticate yourself. Similarly, you may then be asked to input 3 random numbers from a 4-digit PIN and or 3 characters from a 10-character password. This will vary from bank to bank, of course, all in the earlier steps again. In this diagram, you can see it is asking, please enter the following digits from your PIN, or please enter the following characters from your password, 2nd, 4th, or 9th character. This is another way to authenticate a user. In another example, some systems use a handheld device into which the customer inserts their card. They will be asked to enter their PIN. The device will then generate an 8-digit code which the customer types into the web page of the bank. This 8-digit code is generated from an internal clock and PIN. The bank server and the time are both synchronized with the handheld device. The server also stores the PIN. The bank server will therefore know if the 8-digit code entered is correct. Each 8-digit code is only valid for a few minutes before it has to be redone. This system defeats hackers and spyware since the code will change every time the customer logs on to the bank's website. Some banking systems ask the customer to key in parts of their password using drop-down boxes. This is an attempt to defeat spyware key logging softwares. Each of the requested character from the password are entered by selecting a character from a drop-down menu using a mouse, thus eliminating the use of a keyboard. So, in the diagram, you can see it asks, please enter the following characters from your password. 2nd character, 4th character, and 9th character. Once all these stages have been passed, some systems then ask for personal data, such as You last logged into the system on 15 September 2015, is that correct? Your mobile phone number is 9777111 tetra 2, is that correct? What is your mother's maiden name? Assuming the customer successfully negotiate all the security hurdles, they will be sent to the home page on a website. Once you are there, it is important to only use the bank's navigation tools rather than the ones at the top of the screen. Otherwise, you will be locked out of the system and you will need to go through all the earlier steps again. Now let's take a recap of the lesson. We discussed about data loss and corruption and its recovery method. We discussed the data can be corrupted through the accidental loss, for example, accidental deletion of a file, through hardware fault such as head crash of the hard disk, through software fault, for example, incompatible software installed on the system, or through opting the incorrect operation for shutting down the computer or using or ejecting any of the external device. So for the recovery methods, you need to take the regular backups, save your data on regular basis, use strong passwords, use UPS, and follow or adopt standard procedure to operate the machine or the device. Then we discussed about firewall and proxy server, that are two ways to filter out the data or information that you tries to upload or download from the internet. Then we talked about the security protocol. We talked about two of the security protocol. One is SSL, Secure Socket Layer, and the other one is TLS, Transport Layer Security. SSL is a type of protocol that allows data to be sent and received securely over the internet, and it makes sure that your data or the web page you have asked for is secure by putting a padlock sign and HTTPS with a URL. While in transport layer security, certain sort of privacy checks are applied that makes your data more secure, even secure than SSL. Then we talked about session caching. The use of session caching can avoid the need to utilize so much computer time for each connection. Then we talked about encryption and its type. Encryption is basically to protect your data and convert it in the form that is not readable for the intruder. We discussed two types of encryption, symmetric encryption and asymmetric encryption. Symmetric encryption uses one secret key that is used to encrypt data, and that secret key is used at the receiver's end to decrypt the data. While in asymmetric encryption, two secret keys are used. One is the secret primary key, and the other one is the private key. We tried to comprehend the plain text and the ciphertext. Any text that is any representation of data when it is not encrypted is known as the plain text, and when any of the encryption algorithm is applied on that plain text, that becomes the ciphertext. After that, we discussed the authentication, which is a process to verify that data is coming from the authenticated and trusted sources. There are various methods we discussed in authentication, like applying passwords, applying digital signatures, and biometrics. In the end, we discussed denial of service attacks. Denial of service attack is a way in which the website or your email is clogged up with unnecessary traffic, and the legitimate request cannot be executed by the web server. And we ended up our lesson by discussing the application for online banking, that how there are different ways through which the bankers make sure that the customer is authenticated and customer is legitimate to use that particular website. This is it for today's lesson. You can download the assignment from DHA portal to solve over the weekend. Thank you so very much for listening carefully.